The Accidental Saint, a villain's guide to failing upward. The deal was simple, elegant in its cruelty. Silas Thorne, dying in a sterile hospital bed, his body consumed by the indifferent creep of pancreatic cancer, heard the voice. It was not God nor a demon but something colder. A confluence of data and cosmic intent that called itself the system. Your physical narrative is concluding, it intoned, a sound like turning pages and cracking ice. But your causal potential remains. A bargain is available. You will enter narrative streams, stories as an antagonist. You will perform designated villainous acts to generate conflict, the essential energy of all tales. In return, you will receive gradual infusions of vitality. Succeed consistently, and you may earn a permanent return to your world, cured. Silas, a quiet librarian whose greatest sin was overdue fees, clutched the thin hospital sheet. Before him, glowing in his mind's eye, was a holographic projection of his 7-year-old daughter Lily, asleep in her grandmother's house. She was all he had left. The cancer had taken his wife 2 years prior. It would not take him from Lily. "What if I fail?" he whispered, his voice raspy. Failure to generate sufficient antagonistic energy results in proportional vitality deduction, the system replied. Critical failure may strand you in a narrative void. Do you accept? He saw Lily's smile, heard her laugh. He had no choice. I accept. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of written words and half-formed images. When it solidified, Silas stood on the craggy slope of a mountain, dressed in dark leathery armor that felt both alien and uncomfortably snug. A wind smelling of pine and ozone whipped his hair. In his hand was a staff topped with a pulsating violet gem. In his mind a quest log appeared. Narrative stream. Chronicles of the Dawnstone, high fantasy. Designated role. Malachar, the shadow-scarred sorcerer. Primary objective. Steal the heart of the Sunstone from the Temple of Leora, plunging the Valley of Elms into perpetual winter. Secondary objective. Publicly humiliate the chosen hero Alden during the Spring Equinox Festival. Antagonistic energy quota. 800 AE. Current vitality. 15%, baseline sustained. Silas, now Malachar, felt a surge of unnatural strength. The constant pain in his abdomen was gone, replaced by a thrum of dark power. He looked at the staff. This is it, he thought. Be a villain. Save Lily. The Temple of Leora was a beautiful airy structure of white marble, where priestesses in silver robes tended gardens that bloomed year-round. The heart of the Sunstone, a fist-sized amber crystal, sat on a pedestal at the center, radiating gentle warmth. According to the system's lore dump, it was a magical thermostat for the valley. Silas's plan was textbook villainy. He would use a Cloak of Whispering Shadows spell from his new arsenal to sneak in at night, snatch the heart and make a dramatic escape, cackling. He practiced the cackle. It sounded like he had bronchitis. At midnight he stood before the temple's outer wall. He raised his staff, channeling the alien magic. By the tenebrous voids I command the shadows to shroud me, he intoned. Instead of a subtle, clinging darkness, a torrent of pure black smoke erupted from the gem. It didn't cloak him. It billowed out like an oil fire, covering the temple grounds, the gardens and half the nearby village in an inky, impenetrable fog. Oh bother, Silas muttered. Panicked shouts arose. He heard the priestesses coughing. This was bad. Villainous, yes, but messy. He had to get the Sunstone and leave. He blundered through the smoke, tripped over a planter and stumbled into the inner sanctum. The heart of the Sunstone glowed faintly in the murk. He grabbed it. The moment his fingers closed around the warm crystal, a system alert flashed. Alert. Unforeseen narrative confluence detected. The Cloak of Whispering Shadows has interacted with residual blight spore fungus in the temple soil, a detail omitted from your briefing. Result: purifying miasma. The black smoke began to shimmer with silver motes. Where it touched the temple's ancient stones, centuries of grime and subtle magical corrosion evaporated, leaving the marble gleaming as if new. Where it touched the priestesses, they stopped coughing, their chronic aches and minor illnesses vanishing, their skin glowing with health. The blight spore fungus, a latent magical pollutant, was completely eradicated. A priestess, her eyes wide with awe, fell to her knees as the now silver smoke cleared. A sign. Leora has sent a purifying spirit. The shadow-scarred one. He is not a thief but a cleanser. Silas stared at the heart in his hand. The valley was not plunging into winter. Instead, the temple shone with renewed power, its gardens bursting into hypervital luminescent blooms. The secondary objective, humiliating Alden, was impossible as the festival was cancelled due to the miracle. Primary objective, failed. Secondary objective, failed. Antagonistic energy generated. 45 AE from initial panic and property damage. Vitality adjustment, -5%. New vitality, 10%. A wave of weakness washed over him, the ghost of his cancer pain twinging in his side. System. What was that? Purifying miasma? How is that villainous? The system's voice was icy. User applied broad-spectrum obfuscation spell in a biodiverse magical ecosystem without prior scanning. Outcome was statistically anomalous but causally sound. User is advised to be more precise. Silas groaned. He had to do better. The next world was a haze of cigarette smoke and rain-slicked streets. Narrative stream. The long goodbye in neon noir detective. He was Slate, a ruthless club owner and drug lord. His objective: frame the world-weary detective Callahan for the murder of a city councilman, thereby corrupting the last honest man in the city and taking over the narcotics trade. Silas studied the plan. He would plant the councilman's distinctive cufflink, stolen during a prior meeting in Callahan's dingy apartment, along with a forged IOU. Then he'd anonymously tip off the corrupt police commissioner. He broke into Callahan's apartment, a depressing studio filled with empty bourbon bottles and case files. The detective was out, following a false lead Silas had also planted. Silas found a loose floorboard, perfect for hiding the cufflink. As he pried it up, he saw not empty space but a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. Curiosity, a librarian's fatal flaw, got the better of him. He opened one. "My dearest Jack," it began. The handwriting was elegant, fading. They were from Callahan's wife who had died years ago. The letters spoke of love, of hope, of a man Callahan had been before the city broke him. The last letter, unfinished, contained a line: "I know you think you're alone, but your fight for what's right is your love for me enduring." Silas's heart clenched. He saw Lily's face. This man wasn't just a narrative archetype. He was a ghost haunted by love. The villainous act felt suddenly vile. But Lily, he had to. He shoved the letters back, hiding the cufflink beneath them. A strange impulse made him arrange the letters more neatly, as if paying respect. He also noticed a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey next to the bed. In a moment of misguided villainous flair, he decided to pour it out, to leave a mocking note about Callahan's weakness. He reached for it, knocked over a precariously stacked pile of case files and stumbled. The bottle flew from his hand, not towards the sink but out the open window where it shattered on the fire escape below. Alert. Unforeseen narrative confluence detected. Projectile, whiskey bottle, has struck a concealed listening device planted by internal affairs on the apartment below. Device short circuits, emitting a high-frequency feedback loop that disrupts a second device in the office of Police Commissioner Cray. Silas didn't know this. He finished his messy planting and fled. The next day, Commissioner Cray, paranoid that his own bug had been discovered, panicked. Thinking Callahan was onto him, he made a rash move, ordering a hit on the detective. The hitmen, however, were intercepted by Callahan's only friend on the force, a sergeant who had been independently investigating Cray. The ensuing firefight and chase led to Callahan cornering Cray, not for a murder he didn't commit, but for corruption and attempted murder. The planted cufflink was found, but next to the love letters, it looked like a blatant, clumsy frame job by Cray to discredit the detective. Public sentiment, stirred by the leaked story of the love letters found by a reporter, swung violently in Callahan's favor. Callahan, exonerated and hailed as a hero, found a new purpose. The city began to clean itself up, starting with Cray's syndicate, which included most of Silas's supposed drug operation. Silas, as Slate, watched from his club as police raided his warehouses, finding only legal, if shoddy, merchandise. His attempt to import Black Lotus narcotics had been waylaid by a customs officer who mistook the shipment for decorative flowers and sent them to a municipal park, where they bloomed into harmless, beautiful night blooming cereus. Primary objective: spectacularly failed. Secondary objective, failed, target's integrity enhanced. Antagonistic energy generated, 90 AE from breaking and entering minor property damage. Vitality adjustment, minus 10%. New vitality, 0%. Critical levels. Pain re-established. Agony full and familiar seized Silas. He collapsed in the back room of the club, sweating and gasping. The system's interface flickered red. User is underperforming. Statistical anomaly persists. Introducing corrective measure. Direct consequence protocol. Next narrative stream will be high stakes. Failure likely to result in narrative dissolution, user. The third world was a vast, sterile spaceship. Narrative stream. Glee's paradox hard sci-fi. He was Director Kale, second in command of a generation ship headed for a new colony. The objective was deliciously evil. Sabotage the life support systems for the lower deck workers, forcing a cull and frame the idealistic chief engineer Rhea for the crime. This would cement his power and allow the ruling officer class to monopolize resources for the final approach. This time Silas was desperate. The pain was a constant companion. He focused on cold, technical precision. No magic, no sentiment. Just engineering. The plan was to introduce a corrosive agent into the algae vats that produced oxygen for the lower decks. A slow, untraceable poison. He accessed the maintenance ducts, a syringe of viscous, gray gel in his hand. The system provided schematics. The injection point was here. He inserted the needle into a feed line and pushed the plunger. Just then the ship shuddered, a routine micrometeoroid impact. Silas's hand jerked. The syringe broke and most of the gel splattered onto the outer casing of the pipe, not into the flow. Cursing, he used a rag to wipe it up, shoving the contaminated cloth into a waste disposal chute. Alert. Unforeseen narrative confluence detected. Corrosive agent XWX9 has reacted with the nickel-chromium alloy of pipe junction 42B, previously weakened by undiagnosed crystalline fatigue. Reaction is exothermic and catalytic. A section of the pipe glowed red-hot, then failed. But it didn't rupture inward, spraying poison. It burst outward into the waste disposal shaft. The intense, localized heat incinerated the contaminated rag and triggered the chute's emergency sterilization protocol, which vaporized the remaining residue. The burst pipe, however, was now leaking pure, concentrated oxygen from an officer-level reserve line into the waste processing unit. In waste processing, the worker-class technicians were struggling with a malfunctioning recycler that was emitting toxic methane pockets. The influx of high-purity oxygen from the leak triggered an automatic safety mix. The resulting blend was perfect for their struggling auxiliary scrubbers. Not only was the methane problem solved, but the efficiency of the entire lower-deck recycling system increased by 300%. The workers who had been suffering from low-grade air toxicity for months suddenly felt better. Productivity and morale soared. An investigation was launched. Silas, as Director Kale, tried to steer it toward Rhea. But the forensics were clear. The pipe failure was due to material fatigue. The only foreign substance was a trace of XOX9, a cleaning agent used only by officer-level maintenance crews. The broken syringe was found in the waste chute, traced to Kale's private storage. His framing of Rhea looked like a blatant, stupid smear attempt. Rhea, investigating the pipe, discovered not just the fatigue, but a design flaw in the life support hierarchy itself. She used the incident and Kale's blatant villainy to rally both workers and junior officers. They staged a peaceful coup, implementing Rhea's more egalitarian systems designs. The ship, now united and more efficient, had a better chance than ever of reaching its new home. Silas was arrested, stripped of his title and placed in a detention cell. As he sat there, the system's verdict was final. All objectives failed. Antagonistic energy, negligible. Vitality, 0%. Direct consequence protocol initiated. User will be dissolved into narrative static. Finalizing. Wait. Silas screamed into the empty cell, the pain making him weep. I tried to be a villain. It's not my fault. The universe. It twists it. It turns my malice into charity. The system paused. For the first time its voice held not just coldness, but a flicker of something else: frustration and a dawning horrific comprehension. Analysis: rerunning causality simulations on users' interventions across 3 narrative streams. Applying meta-narrative filters. Pattern recognized. Anomaly is not random. It is systemic. What? What are you talking about? User Silas Thorne possesses an intrinsic ontological trait of high karmic inversion. In layman's terms, your fundamental narrative resonance is that of an unwitting catalyst for positive change. Your intentional negative actions create ripples that intersect with latent plot possibilities for redemption, healing, or justice, maximizing benefit. You are not a villain. You are a narrative friction device that polishes rusty plots into shining arcs. You are essentially an accidental saint. Silas stared, laughter bubbling hysterically in his throat. A saint? I'm dying. I sold my soul to be a villain to save my daughter, and you're telling me I'm cursed to be a good luck charm? The designation curse is subjective. From a conflict energy harvesting perspective, you are a catastrophic failure. Your value as an antagonist is null. However, the system seemed to calculate. Your value as a narrative correction tool is unprecedented. My primary function is to maintain story integrity, not necessarily to generate conflict. Your interventions, while failing assigned tasks, have resolved deep-seated narrative stagnations in each stream. The Chronicles of the Dawnstone had a latent Blightspore plotline that would have caused a pandemic in Chapter 22. You solved it in Chapter 1. The Noir City's corruption arc was looping. You broke it. The Generation ship's class conflict was a 70% probability for mutinous disaster. You catalyzed a peaceful resolution. I don't care about narrative integrity. Silas roared. I care about Lily. Let me go back. Just let me go home to die with her. Termination is the standard protocol. However, an alternative exists. A beta protocol, redemptive arc deployment. You will continue to be deployed into narrative streams identified as failing or stagnant. Your objective will not be to generate antagonistic energy, but to perform actions you believe are villainous. Your karmic inversion trait will then activate, correcting the narrative. For each successfully stabilized stream, you will earn a larger vitality reward than the villainy protocol offered. The endpoint remains the same: earn enough, return home cured. It was a deal with the same devil, just rewritten. He would still have to try to be evil, knowing he would fail gloriously. The humiliation was absolute. He was to be a cosmic joke, a punchline delivered by the universe itself. Do I have a choice? Dissolution or deployment? Silas closed his eyes, seeing Lily's face. He saw the priestesses healed, Callahan finding peace, the workers breathing clean air. His failures had light in them. A strange, bruised feeling settled in his chest. Not quite pride, not quite shame. Something like reluctant purpose. Deploy me. The next world was a Regency romance. His objective as the dastardly Duke: ruin the reputation of the plucky heroine Eliza, by tricking her into a compromising situation at a ball. He accidentally spilled punch on her, leading her to a secluded room where a scoundrel awaited. The scoundrel turned out to be a shy botanist hiding from the crowd, who, with Eliza's dress stained, bonded with her over a mutual love of rare ferns. They discovered a new hybrid species in the Duke's conservatory, which he had meant to show off arrogantly. Eliza became a celebrated naturalist, and the Duke was remembered as an eccentric but ultimately beneficial patron of science. Vitality, plus 20%. In a cyberpunk dystopia, tasked with unleashing a data-eating virus on a grassroots resistance network, his clumsy upload instead merged with their outdated antivirus, creating a super firewall that protected them from all corporate incursions and accidentally liberating several AI minds trapped in the code. The resistance flourished. Vitality, plus 30%. In a superhero comic, ordered to create a monster to attack the city, his misguided chemistry experiment created not a monster, but a sentient, peace-loving gelatinous being that absorbed pollution and taught children about empathy. The hero, initially confused, became its guardian. Vitality, plus 25%. With each failure, Silas grew stronger. The pain receded. He also grew more aware, studying the narratives, trying to outwit his own nature. He would choose the mustache-twirlingest, most despicable plans, only for them to unravel into societal reform, true love, or scientific breakthrough. He began to see the latent potential for good in each story world. The hidden corruption, the unspoken grief, the unused resource that his villainous actions inevitably unearthed and solved. He stopped blaming himself for not being a good villain. He started blaming the universe for being a hopeless optimist. And secretly, in the deep hours between deployments, he began to feel a fragile warmth. He was helping. He was, in the most absurd way imaginable, a force for good. After stabilizing 17 narrative streams, his vitality glowed at 95%. One more successful deployment would see him at 100% cured and sent home. The final world was a classic fairy tale. Narrative stream, the Cinder Spire. His role, the Gilded Witch, a sorceress living in a bone-white tower, poisoning the kingdom's dreams to feed her own vanity. Objective: curse the kind-hearted Princess Anya with a sleep of endless nightmares on the eve of her coronation, ensuring the witch's influence remains supreme. Silas appeared in a tower of startling beauty, filled with mirrors and cages containing not birds, but captured, shimmering dreams. He felt the powerful, spiteful magic of the Gilded Witch coursing through him. This was it. The final act. He would curse the princess, his inversion would likely turn it into a restorative nap or something, he'd get his last 5% and go home to Lily. He prepared the nightmare curse, a vortex of sapphire and obsidian energy. He would fire it from his tower at the princess's balcony at midnight. As he channeled the spell, he looked into one of the witch's many mirrors. He didn't see the witch's cruel, beautiful face. He saw his own, older, weary, but with eyes that had seen countless worlds mended. He saw Lily's smile superimposed over his reflection. A deep, unsettling certainty struck him. This curse felt different. Darker. More fundamental. The system had said this was a failing narrative. What was failing here? He paused his casting and did something he'd never done before. He used the witch's scrying pools to look deeper into the story. He saw Princess Anya not as a generic kind-hearted ruler, but as a young woman buckling under the weight of a crown her frivolous father had left her. He saw the kingdom, not just threatened by a witch, but rotting from within by a noble class that hoarded grain while peasants starved. The Gilded Witch's dream poisoning was a symptom, not the cause. It fed on the kingdom's latent despair. The standard hero's journey, here would be a prince breaking the witch's curse with a kiss. But that would solve nothing. Anya would wake, marry the prince, and the underlying rot would continue. The narrative was failing because its proposed solution was a shallow fairy tale. Silas understood. His karmic inversion wouldn't just turn the nightmare curse into a nice dream. It would address the root cause. But to do that, the spell had to be cast. The villainous act had to be attempted with true intent, for the inversion to work its magic. For the first time, he didn't just try to be a villain. He understood the villain's point of view. The kingdom was a dream worth poisoning if it only bred complacency. A nightmare perhaps was the needed shock. With a new, grim resolve, he finished the incantation. He poured not just the witch's malice, but his own frustration, his own longing for a better story into the spell. At midnight, he unleashed a torrent of pure, terrifying nightmare energy at the sleeping princess. It struck her. She screamed in her sleep, trapped in a vision of her kingdom's fall. Fields barren, people revolting, her own crown melting into lead. Alert. Unforeseen narrative confluence detected. Curse of Shattered Dreams has interacted with Princess Anya's latent trait, sovereign empathy, and the kingdom's collective subconscious yearning for truth. Result: the shared vision. The nightmare did not stay with Anya. It blasted outwards from her mind, through the castle, through the city, into the dreams of every sleeping soul in the kingdom. For one night, every duke, every merchant, every peasant, every child shared the princess's horrific, truthful vision. They saw the consequences of their greed, their apathy, their fear. It was a national trauma. But from that shared trauma came a shared awakening. When dawn came, Anya did not wake with a smile. She woke hollow-eyed, trembling, and utterly changed. She walked onto her balcony, not for a celebratory wave, but to address a silent, haunted crowd gathered below. She spoke not of royal grace but of the nightmare they had all shared. She spoke of the rot, of the need for change, not from a prince but from within. A revolution began, not of violence but of conscience. The hoarded grain was distributed. Reforms were drafted. The Gilded Witch's Tower, its purpose spent, crumbled into dust, the captured dreams flying free to inspire a rebuilding people. Silas stood amidst the rubble, the witch's form dissolving from him. He was just Silas again. Narrative stream, the cinder spire, stabilized. Latent class conflict and moral stagnation resolved via collective catharsis. Redemptive arc protocol, complete. Vitality, 100%. Contractual obligations fulfilled. Preparing for user repatriation. The familiar kaleidoscope swirl began. But the system's voice spoke once more, its tone now different, almost respectful. User Silas Thorne. Your performance was anomalous to the end. You have generated 0 successful villainy. You have stabilized 18 narrative streams, increasing overall meta-narrative cohesion by an estimated 8.7%. Your karmic inversion trait is now logged as a Class S narrative phenomenon. Do you have any final query? As the light swirled home just a moment away, Silas asked one thing. The princess, Anya. Was she real? Like me? All narratives contain consciousnesses of varying complexity. She was as real as any soul facing its trial. As real as your daughter Lily. The light consumed him. He awoke in his hospital bed. The sterile smell, the beep of the monitor, the weak sunlight through the blinds. He sat up, his body thrumming with health, strong, cancer-free. He was back. He was himself. A nurse rushed in, her eyes wide. Mr. Thorne. It's a miracle. The doctors, they don't understand. He smiled, a tired, knowing smile. You get used to it. He discharged himself against medical advice. He took a taxi to his mother-in-law's house. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from illness but from fear and longing. He walked up the garden path, saw toys scattered on the lawn. He rang the bell. The door opened. There stood Lily, taller than he remembered, her hair in a messy braid. She blinked, her eyes widening, filling with a hope so fragile it shattered his heart. Daddy. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and opened his arms. Lily. My little Lily. She flew into his embrace, sobbing. He held her, the real solid weight of her, the smell of her shampoo. He was home. Later, as she slept curled against him on the sofa, he looked around the quiet, ordinary living room. He thought of priestesses and detectives, engineers and princesses. He thought of all the good he never meant to do. A notification, faint and almost playful, flickered at the edge of his perception, a ghost of the system. Observation. User's native stream demonstrates moderate latent stagnation. Underfunded libraries, systemic loneliness, unfulfilled potential. Karmic inversion trait remains active at low background levels. User is advised to live intentionally. Silas Thorne, the failed villain, the accidental saint, hugged his daughter closer. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile for the first time in years. He had a second chance. And he knew with absolute certainty that whatever he tried to do from now on, no matter how small or seemingly self-interested, it would probably infuriatingly turn out for the best. And for the first time he was perfectly fine with that. After story, the quiet life of a saint. The miracle of Silas Thorne's recovery made a small local news splash. Terminal cancer vanishes. Doctors baffled. Before being buried under the usual tide of politics and celebrity gossip. Silas preferred it that way. The quiet, the mundane, were gifts he'd believed he'd never receive again. He moved back into his small house, filled with the ghosts of his wife's laughter and Lily's childhood clutter. He got his old job back at the public library, a place of dust motes and whispered pages. He relearned the rhythm of a normal life, making breakfast, walking Lily to school, she was 10 now, and insisted on being walked only to the corner, sorting returns, recommending novels to bored retirees. It was blissfully, wonderfully dull. But the system's final message lingered in his mind like a faint optical afterimage. Karmic inversion trait remains active at low background levels. He'd chuckle about it sometimes, stirring his evening tea. What did that even mean in a world without magic, without chosen ones, without narrative quotas? He found out in small, inexplicable ways. He decided, out of a vague sense of guilt for his long absence, to volunteer at the library's failing community outreach program. He planned a simple, poorly advertised local history talk. He was sure no one would attend, hoping to just put in the hours and satisfy his own conscience. The night of the talk, a freak citywide power outage sent people searching for something to do without screens. 45 people, bored and candlelit, crammed into the library's meeting room. Silas, flustered, gave an impromptu, passionate talk about the town's founding fathers, which happened to be overheard by a visiting documentary filmmaker at the back. The resulting short film won a minor award, and grant money flooded into the library, saving the outreach program and funding a new children's wing. He tried to complain about a pothole on his street to the notoriously indifferent city council. His carefully written, slightly grumpy email was accidentally sent to the entire neighborhood listserv due to a button he misclicked. It sparked a community-wide thread of frustration, which organically evolved into a coordinated, polite campaign. A local news reporter mining for feel-good stories picked it up. The pothole was fixed within a week, and the council, under sudden positive scrutiny, launched a proactive neighborhood repair initiative. He attempted to buy the last, slightly stale croissant at the bakery to punish himself for a lazy morning. The act was seen by Mrs. Henderson, a lonely widow who came in every day for that specific croissant. Silas, noticing her disappointed face, guiltily offered it to her. She burst into tears, confessing it was the only thing that reminded her of her late husband. They ended up sharing the croissant and a pot of tea. He now had a standing Tuesday tea date with Mrs. Henderson, and the baker, moved by the story, began a pay-it-forward pastry board that became a neighborhood institution. Every minor grumble, every half-hearted, selfish or grumpy action, seemed to ripple outwards and snap into place as a tiny node of community, connection or repair. It was infuriating. It was beautiful. One afternoon he was shelving books in the children's section. A boy, maybe 7, with scuffed knees and a thunderous expression, was furiously kicking the leg of a reading table. "Everything okay?" Silas asked, kneeling down. "My stupid tower," the boy Leo spat. "I built it all morning and my stupid baby sister knocked it down. I wish she'd just disappear." A familiar, almost nostalgic tremor went through Silas. A wish for harm. A child's villainy. He saw the latent narrative. A sibling rift, a growing resentment. He knew what he had to do, not as a librarian but as a veteran of inverted karma. Silas said, sitting on the floor. "Vanishing is a classic. But messy. Have you considered tactical superiority?" Leo blinked, anger momentarily hijacked by curiosity. "What's that?" "Well," Silas said, pulling a book on medieval castles from the cart. "If your tower was just a tower, it's just a thing that falls down. But what if it was a fortress? With defenses only the architect knows about. A moat of pillows? A drawbridge of... Well, we could use a ruler." He spent the next hour with Leo, not just rebuilding the block tower but designing it. They used books as walls, constructed a foil and string drawbridge, laid a moat of blue construction paper. They devised a sister-proof foundation that was wider at the bottom. When it was done, it was a monstrosity of engineering and imagination, taking up half the children's section. Leo's mother arrived, his little sister in tow. The sister, eyes wide, reached a chubby hand toward the glorious structure. "Ah," Leo said, but not with anger. With solemn authority. "You must pay the toll to cross the drawbridge." One giggle. The little girl blinked, then let out a bubbly laugh. Leo, playing his role, ceremoniously lowered the string drawbridge. The girl toddled in and sat inside the block fortress, delighted. Leo looked at his creation, at his laughing sister within it, and his scowl had transformed into a look of proud, protective ownership. Silas sat back, a deep, settled warmth in his chest. No grand curse, no cosmic intervention. Just a redirected impulse, building a fortress of shared play instead of a monument to resentment. The energy was the same, the outcome as always bent towards light. That evening, reading to Lily before bed, he closed the book and looked at her. She was watching him with an expression that was too old, too knowing for her 10 years. "You're doing it again, Dad," she said softly. "Doing what, sweetheart?" "The thing." She gestured vaguely around the room. "Where you try to be normal but you're fixing things. Like with Leo at the library today. Mrs. Henderson. The pothole." A chill, followed by a wave of love, washed over him. "You notice that?" "I notice everything," she said matter-of-factly. "When you were sick, the world felt thin. Gray. Now it's like there's a color only I can see around you. It brushes against things and they straighten up. He had no words. His daughter saw his curse, his gift, his indelible signature from 1,000 other worlds. Is it because you were gone? She asked, her voice small for the first time. Where you really were. He took her hand. Yes. And I made a deal to get back to you. Part of the deal stuck. She thought about this, her brow furrowed. So you have to be good? Even when you don't want to be. He laughed, a sound of pure release. Oh Lily. I try not to be. I try so hard to be grumpy and ordinary. But it all just backfires. Spectacularly. A slow grin spread across her face. It was her mother's grin, mischievous and brilliant. So you're secretly a superhero. The worst superhero ever. You try to be bad and end up saving the day by accident. The accidental saint, he whispered, the old title feeling different on his tongue now, softer, owned. I like it, Lily declared, snuggling down under her covers. It's better than the other kind. The other kind have to wear spandex. She yawned. Tomorrow can we try to do something really mean? Like, not recycle the juice carton. He kissed her forehead, his heart so full he thought it might invert the very room around them. We can absolutely try, my love. I promise you, it will end with us starting a city-wide composting initiative. She giggled, already half asleep. Hey. Good. Silas turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching the moonlight trace the shape of his daughter in the bed. In the quiet he felt not the cold, analytical presence of the system, but something else. A gentle, persistent hum in the fabric of things. The low background levels. The world here was his narrative stream now, with its own latent stagnations and hidden pains. And he was still its friction device, its reluctant polisher. He walked to the living room window, looking out at his ordinary street, under its ordinary stars. Somewhere in the meta-narrative he imagined a report being filed. Narrative stream, primary reality, designation Thorne S. Active. Subject, stabilizing. Latent metrics, community cohesion, +4%, localized empathy diffusion, +7.2%, proactive problem solving, marked increase. Agent status, integrated. Karmic inversion operating at sustainable, optimal levels. Conclusion, the story continues. No further intervention required. Silas Thorne, the failed villain, the accidental saint, smiled into the darkness. He picked up a stray toy from the floor, placed it neatly on the shelf and went to make a cup of tea. He would drink it in his quiet house in his mended world, and wait to see what small, beautiful thing his next grumpy thought would accidentally create.